What if the very connections we crave, the deep intimacy we seek, are quietly erasing who we are? We're told to open ourselves up, to merge with others. But what happens when that merging starts to steal your unique identity? There are people who consistently reject intimacy, not because they don't want love, but because they've discovered something unsettling. Closeness can feel like disappearing. They keep relationships at arm's length, never quite letting anyone in. The walls stay up even when their heart wants to lower them. And they carry a question nobody else seems to ask. What if losing yourself in someone else isn't romantic, it's extinction? Every push toward intimacy feels like erasure to their nervous system. Psychologists describe it as engulfment fear and identity diffusion anxiety. It's not about being incapable of love, it's about how their brain experiences closeness. Intimacy requires merging, sharing space, time, thoughts, routines. For some, that feels like coming home. For others, it feels like vanishing. Researchers studying autonomy needs find that certain individuals experience relationship closeness as a threat to self-coherence. Their identity feels fragile, requiring protection. What looks like rejection of intimacy is actually protection of self. When someone gets too close, they can't locate themselves anymore. Here's the paradox. They desperately want to be loved, but panic when love arrives. They crave connection, but suffocate when someone wants to know them fully. They're attracted to depth, then flee when depth is offered. They want intimacy on their terms, closeness without engulfment, love without loss of self. If you've ever sabotaged a relationship the moment it got serious, not from fear of commitment, but from fear of disappearing into it, you know this terror. The world calls it commitment phobia. They experience it as self-preservation. We live in a culture that romanticizes fusion, two becoming one, soulmates completing each other. Those who resist get labeled emotionally unavailable, damaged, afraid of real love. But what if the framework misses something crucial? What if some people's identity is genuinely threatened by traditional intimacy? Scientists studying differentiation find that healthy relationships require maintaining selfhood within connection. But some nervous systems experience any closeness as total absorption. What if rejecting intimacy isn't pathology, but protecting something precious? The world insists merging is love. They've learned merging is loss. This pattern often begins in childhood. Maybe they grew up with enmeshed parents who had no boundaries, where everyone's emotions bled into everyone else's, where having your own feelings meant betrayal, where separateness was punished and conformity demanded. So they learned early, closeness equals erasure. Or perhaps they had a caregiver who consumed them, who treated the child as an extension of themselves rather than separate person. Over time, that became wiring. Intimacy equals invasion. Love equals losing yourself. Not because they're broken, but because their nervous system learned that maintaining boundaries is survival. But here's the truth. People who reject intimacy often possess fierce commitment to authenticity. They refuse to perform connection they don't genuinely feel. They won't fake fusion to satisfy someone else's needs. Their distance isn't coldness, it's integrity. They'd rather be alone and whole than coupled and fragmented. Research on autonomy shows that self-preservation in relationships can indicate strength, not weakness. They've learned who they are and won't compromise it. But the gift becomes curse when all intimacy feels like a threat, when walls that protect also isolate completely. Psychologists call it the intimacy-autonomy conflict. It begins when someone wants closeness, real closeness. Their nervous system floods with panic. Not fear of them, fear of losing themselves in them. So they create distance, become critical, withdraw emotionally, pull back just when pulling close would deepen things. The other person feels rejected and either pursues harder or leaves. Either response confirms their fear. Intimacy means either being consumed or abandoned. Soon they can only do surface connections. Anything deeper triggers the shutdown. In ancient contexts, extreme self-reliance had survival value. Being emotionally independent meant you couldn't be manipulated or controlled. But modern intimate relationships require different skills. They demand interdependence, the ability to stay yourself while also connecting deeply. For people wired for emotional autonomy, this feels impossibly contradictory. They're not rejecting love. They're operating with protective mechanisms that worked once, but now prevent the very connection they crave. It's not unwillingness, it's incompatibility between their wiring and intimacy's demands. The path forward isn't forcing themselves to merge. It's learning that intimacy doesn't require erasure. Therapists recommend finding partners who respect autonomy, who understand that love can exist without fusion, that two whole people connecting is stronger than two halves becoming one. It means practicing small vulnerabilities, sharing one true thing and noticing you still exist afterward, building evidence that closeness doesn't always equal disappearing. Why does intimacy feel like erasure? Because somewhere deep, they learned that being close to someone means becoming what they need you to be, that love is conditional on conformity, that to be loved is to be absorbed. Psychologists studying enmeshment trauma explain that rejection of intimacy often protects against re-experiencing that loss of self. If no one gets close, no one can consume you. The logic is perfect and devastating. They've chosen wholeness over the risk of fragmentation. Here's what others miss. When someone who rejects intimacy finally lets you close, it's extraordinarily meaningful. They don't give access easily. When they choose vulnerability with you, they're trusting you won't erase them. Their love isn't performed through constant togetherness. It's demonstrated through staying themselves while staying present. They've learned real intimacy isn't losing yourself in someone. It's finding yourself more fully while being witnessed by another. People who consistently reject intimacy aren't incapable of love. They're protecting an identity that feels fragile. They've learned their rejection makes sense given their history. They're discovering they can have connection without fusion, can be close to someone without disappearing into them, can love deeply while remaining distinctly themselves. The path forward isn't traditional intimacy, it's conscious intimacy. When they finally find someone who sees closeness and autonomy as compatible rather than contradictory, they don't reject it anymore. They choose it, carefully, courageously, on their own terms.